Think about the very last time you bought something online. Chances are you used the plumbing laid down by one specific company. Well, let's dive right into this explainer and explore what is honestly the ultimate irony of modern tech. We're looking at a pioneer that literally built the foundation for our digital economy, yet somehow now finds itself fighting for its life against the very forces it unleashed. Today, we're exploring the wild story of PayPal, from its completely chaotic beginnings to its astronomical peak, and, well, its current precipitous drop. There's this quote from a recent analysis that absolutely hits the nail on the head. It says, PayPal didn't just invent the dirt we walk on in fintech, it created the people who are burying it. I mean, it's a Silicon Valley origin myth that reads like a Greek tragedy, just, dressed in a hoodie. We're talking about a company that managed to win almost every single battle it fought, yet is somehow on the verge of losing the entire war.
Part 1. The honeymoon coup. The bloody birth of an empire. So to truly understand where PayPal is today, we have to travel all the way back to the sleep-deprived chaos of Palo Alto in 1999 and 2000. Because this company, it wasn't born from some unified, harmonious vision. No, it was born from a brutal veto. You had two companies, Peter Thiel and Max Levchin's Confinity and Elon Musk's X.com, sharing the exact same building and just fiercely competing, door to door. By March 2000, they were burning cash at ruinous rates, so they merged in an act of pure desperation, just to avoid going completely bankrupt. But the internal war, it never actually stopped. It climaxed in September 2000. Get this. While a young CEO named Elon Musk was boarding a flight for a long overdue honeymoon in Sydney, Thiel and Levchin were back in a windowless conference room staging a literal boardroom coup. Literally, by the time Musk's plane touched down in Australia, he had already been replaced. Now, this wasn't just a simple clash of products. It was a massive clash of egos versus pragmatism. Musk desperately wanted the X.com brand. He envisioned this massive global financial superstore that did absolutely everything: banking, insurance, mutual funds, the whole shebang. But the rest of the team? They favored a much simpler, pragmatic tool just for emailing payments, which they called PayPal. That intense tension ultimately scrapped the X.com name entirely and birthed the PayPal we know today. Actually, as a quick and kind of hilarious aside, Musk kept the domain name and clearly kept the grudge, which explains quite a bit about his recent rebranding of Twitter to X 24 years later.
Part 2. The PayPal Mafia, Silicon Valley's greatest export.
After somehow surviving the dot-com crash with a miraculous IPO in early 2002, the company was swiftly bought out by eBay for $1.5 billion. But that original team just couldn't stomach eBay's traditional bureaucratic corporate life, so they scattered. And that scattering created what is arguably one of the most consequential groups in business history. Peter Thiel, who's widely recognized as the dawn of this group, intentionally engineered this culture. As he's noted, from the start, I wanted PayPal to be tightly knit instead of transactional. He recruited directly from highly trusted university circles, specifically Stanford and the University of Illinois, looking for deep ideological alignment. He wanted people genuinely excited about creating a totally new digital currency. This tightly knit culture meant that when they inevitably left eBay, they stayed in touch, they invested in each other, and they gave a whole generation of outsiders the unshakable confidence to build world-changing companies of their own.
Just look at the absolute explosion of innovation that followed their exit. Fortune magazine eventually dubs them the PayPal Mafia, famously photographing them hanging out in tracksuits at a San Francisco bar. Tesla, SpaceX, LinkedIn, YouTube, Palantir, Yelp, Affirm. This crew went on to create literally trillions of dollars in value. The incredible takeaway here is that PayPal didn't just build a payment button. It built the entire generation of founders that would come to define modern Silicon Valley.
Part 3. The network war, battling the planet and winning. But long before they conquered Silicon Valley, PayPal had to survive an absolute gauntlet of external enemies just to stay alive. To do that, they had to leverage a powerful secret weapon, an economic concept called network externalities. Basically, it means a product becomes more valuable as more people use it. Early on, PayPal pioneered this grassroots marketing strategy of paying users $5 to $10 just to sign up. Now, this wasn't them carelessly burning cash. It was a highly deliberate strategy to trigger two-sided network effects. As more buyers used it, merchants absolutely had to accept it. And as more merchants accepted it, buyers demanded it. It created an absolutely insurmountable first-mover advantage. This concept made it incredibly difficult for rivals to even enter the space. It essentially created a natural monopoly that totally crushed eBay's own heavily promoted payment system, Billpoint. Think about the irony there. Despite eBay aggressively pushing Billpoint on its own platform and teaming up with massive banking giants like Wells Fargo and Visa, it failed entirely. Because PayPal had already locked in those network effects.
Users simply wanted to use what everyone else was using, even over eBay's own in-house system.
I mean, they were fighting a massive multi-front war. Max Levchin was frantically building automated fraud detection tools, ironically naming them after a Russian hacker named Igor who was actively trying to rob them, just to save the company from foreign organized crime. Then, on the very eve of their IPO, Louisiana regulators suddenly demanded money transmitter licenses to try and shut them down. Even New York's Attorney General Eliot Spitzer tried to squeeze them over online gambling transactions. Yet, against all odds, PayPal survived it all.
Part 4. The Golden Cage and the Fall, the 5 Wounds. After 13 years operating inside eBay, what industry observers called a suffocating golden cage, where their strategic freedom was effectively zero, PayPal finally spun off in 2015. And as an independent company, they were suddenly free, catching a massive COVID-era sugar high that, unfortunately, masked some deep structural decay. At first, it looked unstoppable. Under CEO Dan Schulman, active accounts surged past 400 million globally. They launched new features, pushed into crypto, and the stock completely skyrocketed. By July 2021, the company touched a peak market capitalization of $360 billion. Let that sink in. It was briefly one of the 20 most valuable companies on planet Earth.
But just 5 years later, reality set in, and it set in hard. When the pandemic tailwinds faded, growth completely stalled out. Over 80% of that peak value was wiped out, dropping the company's valuation to roughly $38 billion by February 2026. This wasn't just a broader market correction, folks. This was a fundamental structural crisis for the company. The reality is, PayPal isn't just facing one hurdle. They are suffering from a full-blown clinical syndrome. First, you have the Braintree paradox. They're growing their unbranded processing through Braintree, but at much lower margins, meaning the bigger they get, the less profitable they become. Second, big tech is invading. Think about it. How often do you just double-click the side of your iPhone to pay with Apple Pay instead of actively logging into PayPal? They're losing because Apple removes friction right at the device level. Third, they've never truly figured out how to monetize Venmo's massive user base. Fourth, insanely aggressive competitors like Stripe and Adyen are stealing away the lucrative enterprise market. And finally, that talent exodus we talked about that began way back in 2002, it never actually stopped.
The chaos of this structural decay is perfectly mirrored in their leadership. It's a total revolving door. Dan Schulman retired at the end of 2023. His successor, Alex Chriss, lasted barely 17 months before being replaced in early 2026 by Enrique Loris. It's a massive lesson learned. Sometimes the absolute most important competitive advantage a company can have is simply continuity. Contrast this CEO carousel with their fierce rival Stripe, which has maintained the exact same two brilliant leaders since 2010. Night and day.
Part 5. Can the OG survive? The final hand.
So as the new CEO Enrique Loris takes the helm, he inherits a company in severe decline, but one that is absolutely not dead. I mean, they still possess 434 million accounts, massive global trust, and they generate a staggering $6 billion in annual free cash flow. He essentially has 3 final strategic cards left to play. Step 1, the buyback fortress. Using that massive free cash flow to aggressively repurchase shares, essentially shrinking the company back into profitability. Step 2, the Venmo breakout, finally converting Venmo's massive cultural footprint into a standalone revenue-generating fintech brand. And step 3, the stablecoin bet, integrating their dollar stablecoin PYUSD to build a brand new on-chain payment rail for the future.
PayPal gave us Tesla, SpaceX, YouTube, and the plumbing for the modern financial web. But caught in the intense crossfire between nimble neobanks, developer-loved platforms like Stripe, and massive big tech distributors like Apple, well, can this legacy pioneer truly reinvent itself and survive structural change? Or is it possible that the absolute greatest thing PayPal ever did for the world was simply letting its founders leave?